This is the Rising Tide Startups podcast, where we chat with startup founders from all over the globe to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Taylor Black. Taylor, thanks for joining me on Rising Tide.
Kevin, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I mean, I've already made Taylor apologize for where he lives and how he keeps it a secret from the rest of us in the country. He's in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. But Taylor, share a little bit about yourself with our listeners that you think they would round out and build a foundation for the chat here.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Taylor Black. I live in Seattle, Washington, the Emerald City. It's particularly green this time of year with all the rain. Born and raised here. I'm the oldest of 11. My dad was an entrepreneur himself, and a bunch of us kind of have that dyed in the wool. My first business was actually in high school when I built a landscaping company that with a number of my friends, and we landscaped all over the greater Seattle area. I then off to undergrad at Gonzaga. I went and built a couple of businesses there, including a venture lab that's still running in the business school there at Gonzaga.
Wow.
Then I went to grad school, got a master's in cognitional theory, and then a law degree in Boston. But I never practiced as an attorney, Kevin, because that entrepreneurial streak had me starting a B2B SaaS company while I was in law school.
Of course it did.
Right, yeah.
Right. Like all law students do.
Of course. Had to keep busy somehow, right?
That's right.
And that was doing really well by the end of law school. So I ended up pursuing that for a couple of years before selling it in 2015. After that, I consulted a little bit, but then really got into the venture building space. In many ways, I feel like it's just a great landing place for an entrepreneur, because not only are you building ventures, you're building a series of ventures, a venture pipeline in many ways. Yeah. So I worked with the Invention Science Fund, helping them build out their venture studio in the deep tech space. Now my day job is at Microsoft, doing the same thing in Kevin Scott's office of the CTO. But as an entrepreneur, working inside those large companies is great, but you can't not do the entrepreneur thing on the outside as well. So my nights and weekends job is Fizzy Ventures, where I act as kind of a fractional CPO, chief product officer, sure, or chief operations officer, yep, depending on what the startups in my portfolio need at any given time, and helping them get to product market fit and hit that growth curve. So yeah.
So it's interesting. I've used this term, a lot on previous episodes, this idea that, entrepreneurs who work for companies are just entrepreneurs, and it's interesting. And I'm curious to hear your take on this, but it is so interesting to me that the ones that we've interviewed, when they're hired by companies or whatever, if you would look at the job description and what they actually do on a given day, the job morphed around them, and what they wanted to do. They did the minimum that needed to be done to meet the requirements of the job, but they had they were always pushing boundaries. Is that kind of how you operate on a daily basis?
Yeah, very much so. And in two different veins, really. I'm the reason why I was able to join Microsoft with my entrepreneurial background is that I'm building a venture studio. So I'm being an entrepreneur inside the ecosystem. I don't think I could have joined Microsoft, a bigger company as it is, if it wasn't for having that spark, having been able to do that. It'd be a unique
space. Yeah,
exactly. And in particular, working with other founders, founders of incubations inside my program. They're the ones that have that little light in their eye and a bit of a devil may care, but also sticking enough to the corporate guidelines and rules that they don't push the envelope too far and get launched out of the company. But that's definitely a piece of it. And I think the other thing that happens too for us entrepreneurs is sometimes life circumstances put you inside the enterprise or a larger company, and so you keep that little flame alive by doing something on the side with a little venture.
You're exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're exactly. I mean, I have a day job that that is my primary income. And I
Yeah,
love that time I'm spending in that Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 type environment. But man, nights and weekends, it's like Jekyll and Hyde. I'm a
yeah,
different cat. I mean,
exactly.
it is a yeah. There's a different world going on. But I I want to take a little rabbit trail here just for a
Sure.
second because of your specific area. So, I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, and a lot of it is just scrolling and observing and reading profiles and things like that. But there are so many people that would say, I'm a VC, I'm a venture fund, I'm an angel investor, I'm this, it kind of in that space. How does one end up in that space, you know, unless you bring money to the table? Like,
Yeah,
did you have to have, is it only for trust fund babies or is it
yeah,
also for, people that are just saying, you know what, actually I could be a VC, but my seed round is $1,000. It's not
yeah.
100,000 or it's not 1 million, So what's how kind of define that space for us mere
Sure.
mortals that aren't there?
Of course, no, certainly. And there's the way that I approach angel investing, and honestly, I've only been an angel investor for a couple of years, where I've been on boards of startups for much longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would kind of overlap those two in my mind, and in particular how I approach my work at Fizzy Ventures. My value add, I mean, I'm not a billionaire, and so my primary value add is my insight and my time that I can
Mm-hmm.
give this
Yeah.
startup is so that they're able to move faster and take down blocks that might be novel to them, but I've seen many times. Um, and so most of my investing is time that I've
More sweat equity.
invested
Yeah.
exactly all that
Mm-hmm.
sweat equity. Sometimes even not for any place on the cap table, just because I love this entrepreneur who's trying to get
Mm-hmm.
something scrappy off the
Mm-hmm.
ground, and they're doing the hard work, and anything that I can do to make that a little easier for them, maybe 3 drops less of sweat a week
Yeah.
or something like that.
Some people
Then
play
I'm
golf. You
yeah,
start companies. That's right.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's also a number of vehicles that are cropping up and that enable non-accredited investors to
Mm-hmm.
participate in
Mm-hmm.
in angel rounds. Special purpose vehicles, different ways of aggregating a set of angels around a particular investment opportunity. And all that's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
The but I no there's an emphasis on fun there too, because as we know, startup investing is one of the most volatile areas of investing
It's
that
not for
one can.
cowards.
It
That's
is
right.
not. It is not. In fact, I firmly believe that you should be happy to kiss any money that you invest in a startup goodbye, and
Hmm.
don't count on it as your
This is
401k
not my
index
retirement
fund.
fund. That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
No doubt. No doubt about it. And it is interesting. I mean, I love the space. Now,
Hmm.
obviously I don't have the funding to step into that, nor the expertise that you bring to the table either. But I just love the whole startup, that front end stage, of I don't want to run something for 10 years. I just love the kind of
Yes.
literally the startup, hence the term rising tide startups.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
walk us through like who is your ideal, what's your ideal idea, that would
Sure.
come to Fizzy Ventures that you would say, yeah, this is a good fit. You may not have product market fit yet, but you got a good
Yeah.
idea. I like the team that's trying to get this off the ground. What does that look like? What does a 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 look
Yeah.
like for you?
Yeah, Kevin, that's such a fantastic question, and it's a place that I love. I love that 0 to 1. The one in my mind being product market fit.
Hmm.
Nearly all of the companies that I work with haven't achieved product market fit. They haven't hit the time when you're supposed to pour a whole lot of money on
Yeah,
it and grow and that hockey stick, because you only pour money on something that has product market
right.
fit. But the way that I think about it, I think there's two things, and this is unique, I think, to my perspective on things. I'm not a financial guru or anything along those lines. I don't have a finance degree, so I don't think about it from that Wall Street sort of perspective.
Hmm.
I think about it in terms of the team and in terms of the problem that they're trying to solve and the solution that they've come up with to that problem. Um, the team, first off, they gotta want it. They gotta want it. And there's hard. I mean, there's some indicators there. It's not a it's one of those things though, you kind of have to meet them. You have to meet them. You have to get to know them. You have to see how they think about problems. You have to see the way in which the light in their eye goes off.
Hmm.
Some investors will say, oh, they need to be working on it full time, and that's an indicator to them that the necessary like energy is there. That's not at all for me. It's very much kind of spending enough time with the entrepreneur to see how much they love this idea and how much energy they're putting towards it. Um, Two is the problem. The team has to know the problem well enough that they are in love really with the problem and not their own solution. Um, I've met many entrepreneurs who are in love with their own solution and and struggle trying to find a problem that is big enough or rich enough for their solution to make a company out of. Sometimes it's even a solution just for a problem that they themselves experience, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not a company. So that problem has to be big and meaty, and that team really has to understand that problem and love the problem, not necessarily their solution to it. The solution then is the team has to be able to build it.
Yeah.
I've met a number of entrepreneurs who kind of have a rough understanding of the problem, but don't have any understanding of how a solution would
Hmm.
get to that point, either because they don't know how to build it, or because they're not familiar with the technology space or familiar with the steps from steps to a paying customer and what that looks like from a sales cycle perspective. But those are the three things that I really look for.
Hmm.
And once I find those, I'm happy to invest some time and occasionally some money.
Not necessarily specific verticals you're looking at. I mean, it could
None.
be virtually anywhere.
Yep, exactly. Virtually anywhere. I've had the opportunity to work in deep tech. I've had the opportunity to work obviously in heavy software. But also, I've helped build houses as a building contractor. I have a degree in biochem as well. So I'm really broad in terms of industry. But if I can find those three things, the team, the problem, and the solution, uh, that's why I'm sector agnostic, is because I don't have other companies or financials in that particular sector that I'm concerned about. I'm just bloodthirsty after those three things.
And now here's a quick word from one of our new sponsors on Rising Tide Startups.
At Navicus, we know you spend far too much time on administrative tasks. Let us take those off your plate so you can focus on the highest value activities in your business. We have highly trained, highly vetted specialists ready to take on those administrative responsibilities at an affordable and effective rate. Check us out at navicus.com, proud sponsor of Rising Tide Startups podcast. I mean, obviously, based on your bio, the intro you did, you obviously learned your grit from the dinner table, having to fight for food between
Yeah.
11 kids. So
Although I'm the oldest, so I did,
that's
they
right.
did the fighting.
That's
No,
right.
it's good.
Exactly. Yeah, I was fine for a while there until all those kids started showing up. But and obviously the classic underachiever. I mean, you haven't, no degrees and haven't pursued anything to completion. But what an amazing, history, what a mosaic that created around yourself to kind of bring to bear. But um, what is what does the average day look like? And I'm thinking more toward the Fizzy venture side. I
Sure.
mean, I can picture a Microsoft corporate day, a little easier, but walk us through a typical, maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
whenever you're working on that. But what does it look like?
Yeah, certainly. And often it is 3 o'clock in the morning, particularly when I have startups across the world.
Mm-hmm.
One that I'm spending a lot of
Got
time
to
on
work
right.
asynchronously.
Exactly. And it actually works out well for sticking with the corporate schedule too, because all of my side gig work happens outside of the workday.
Yep.
Um, But yeah, let me see. Yeah, I'd say I spend about 5, maybe 10 hours a week on my side venture. A lot of it in the early mornings,
Mm-hmm.
and then a good chunk on Saturday or Sunday. Um, and what that primarily looks like is I'm meeting with the startup team, and we're going through their actual product problems or their go-to-market problems. And I'm helping them bring their uh, bring their methodology and their way of thinking about their idea validation
Mm-hmm.
and their way of thinking about their customer discovery into a really fine-honed sort of practice, so that they're able to make mistakes faster, learn from them more quickly and more repeatedly, so that they're able to make better progress. What I also do is when they encounter kind of a regulatory or a structural or a legal or an HR sort of barrier,
Hmm.
those I'm all very familiar with and have a
Yep.
deep background in. And so those I can kind of block and tackle for them so that
Right.
they can kind of bloodthirstily go after that product market fit
Mhm.
sort of a problem, which is the biggest thing for a startup to overcome. Um, so generally, that's about three-quarters of my time. It's working with the teams directly, going, seeing what the latest product thing is, hearing from the founder. Um, I'd say another quarter of the time is running my business as a business. It's looking for new startup leads.
Hmm.
It's occasionally getting consulting gigs with other venture studios or innovation collectives across the world, where I'm helping them set up their own processes and their own structures for
Hmm.
doing this kind of thing at scale inside the enterprise, or as a collaboration between startups and the enterprise in order to come to a certain sort of innovation
Yeah.
a deliverable. But yeah, that's about how the time is split.
And I mean, you said you weren't on the necessarily on the cap table, but I mean, I can't imagine what, the value of like your network that you would bring to the table too, not just experience, but the digital virtual Rolodex you're bringing, to the
100%.
table as well. And like when they have these problems, if you can't solve it, if you can't answer it yourself, you certainly know somebody that can,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
is like 1 degree away from where you sit right there. But tell us a success story, that
Yeah.
has come through that you said, hey, maybe one especially that you think, I kind of took a flyer on this one and it just kind of went unicorn on me. So,
Yeah, certainly, certainly. Um, Man, there's a couple of them. One of my favorites, actually, there's a company called Altus .io. And like I said, all of my companies are very early stage, and
hmm.
so a bunch of the ones that I consider success stories are ones that have found product market fit,
Right,
not necessarily ones that have IPO'd
right.
or have exited.
Exit, yeah.
Um, yeah, Altus has a fantastic story. They're an AI platform that allows, and their platform helps user researchers come to insights about the conversations that they have with customers more quickly.
Hmm.
Um, it was built by a number of user researchers, and they're incredibly thoughtful about the way in which they approach the problem that they identified as user researchers themselves, and then were able to confirm by validating with the market of user researchers that yes, this is indeed a problem of taking dozens and dozens of interviews and trying to get cohesive insights that can apply directly to your product and iterations on your product so that you can continually grow your business. Um, they uh, they were so effective at that and building that flywheel of product learnings themselves that eventually they built themselves out of their original target market. They started showing once they got their product got to a certain level of accuracy and intelligence, when they started showing it to customer research teams, and the customer research teams could see what it was capable of, the research teams themselves realized that the product could potentially make their job obsolete. Um,
That's a
uh,
sticky wicket, as the Brits would say.
isn't that a sticky? Yeah, very interesting. Now, I think I think intelligent teams still did move forward with them because they
Hmm.
realized that there's always going to need to be a human in the loop.
Yep.
Um, that narrowed their target audience quite a bit. And so they, realizing that they had found product market fit in the problems plus solution, but they needed to pivot to a different target audience. And just watching them do that very seamlessly and flawlessly by approaching basically the customers of the user research teams was just a tour de force in how they went about all of their whole business angle. Um, they're doing really well right now. They're on a great kind of hockey stick trajectory
Hmm.
now that they found that product market fit and are running forward with that, which is I think is really impressive given the kind of saturation of AI startups out
Yep.
there right now
Yep.
too. Here's one with some real meat behind it,
Hmm.
which is exciting.
And maybe possible decline of a ton of, AI startups out there that
Yeah,
are AI focused.
yeah.
Um, was that created from like a team in a corporation that had an itch that they needed to scratch? Were they a product team in a company, or was the
No,
founder
so
a product team
no, actually,
leader?
so it was an idea taken on by a product manager who saw this as a need. It was something that her company wasn't interested in building. And so she went and did it herself, having gained a lot of the knowledge of her customer by being who her future customer was
Mm,
prior to
yeah.
launching the company. And I helped build a kind of venture studio actually here in Seattle called Venture Out that helped entrepreneurs inside large companies leave and start the company that they wanted to start. Um, and now, kind of being inside the enterprise, you'd be surprised at how happy enterprises are for entrepreneurs to leave them and go do that.
Hmm.
Because they know they can't keep that kind of energy and spirit inside their company. They also know that in the vast majority of cases, the entrepreneur is building something that the company has no interest in building themselves.
Mm, yep.
It doesn't fit their business
Yep.
model.
Yep.
They don't want to allocate resources to it. And it mostly works for larger companies anyway to acquire that thing 5 or 10 years down the road
Yep.
once the entrepreneur has figured out all the hiccups and been
Certainly.
able to move at entrepreneur startup speed rather than corporate machination speed.
Right.
So, yeah, yeah,
A lot of
I
benefits to that.
exactly. It's a great ecosystem.
It's almost like I mean, that's like a forced intersection. I mean, what Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, that's a forced decision. Like
Yeah.
if you're chasing something and your company says, "Hey, great idea. We're not
Yeah.
interested." You
Yeah.
gotta. That's when you really have to have that life pivot, or that life. You do come to that fork in the road and say, "Hey, which way am I going to go here?" So,
You do. You do. And
um,
it can be a tough decision.
no doubt about it, and not for the weak-willed, or the weak-minded for sure.
Not
But
at all.
um, who is like an ideal, like our listeners that are listening to this thinking, who am I not wasting time contacting busy ventures? Who am I? What's the ideal kind of potential future client profile look like that would contact you and say, hey, hey, let's start this conversation? Is there a, is there kind of a avatar prototype,
Yeah.
situation that you would look for?
Yeah, totally. There's two because I kind of have two different business offerings, as it were, under Fizzy Ventures. One is you're a startup, or you're thinking about doing a startup, and you need to have a rigorous idea validation session. Um, I help entrepreneurs kill their darlings so that they're able to move on to the ones that actually have some traction.
Hmm.
And there's some great idea validation mechanisms around that. Because it hurts my heart to see entrepreneurs falling in love with an idea that they haven't actually tested or vetted out with customers. Um, because they have all this energy towards something that might not thrive.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of service offering number one, and here to help entrepreneurs in any stage of their journey as part of that, from having that nifty idea all the way to getting that exit.
Hmm.
Although mostly I'm helpful up to product market fit, and after that you know what to do more or less.
Yeah.
I've in my experience. Um, the second one is you're trying to do this inside a company. You are trying to build an innovation function. You're trying to build a partnership with startups on the outside so that you're bringing fresh innovation and fresh ideas into your own company and some sort of innovation sort of practice. And I use innovation as in a really broad sense. There's dozens and hundreds of titles that could go under an innovation function there. And what I do there is I help you set up the system. It's kind of the almost the productization of a startup where
Mm.
and in fact in some
Yeah.
ways I talk about my job at Microsoft as being a product manager, except my products are all startups.
Hmm.
um, and there I'm able to help set up your corporate ecosystem, whether that's a venture capital arm to or some small startup investing that your venture is doing in order to innovate and
Hmm.
potentially take that startup in later in. I also help build ecosystems between companies in that case too. By virtue of my legal background, I have a lot of experience in kind of structuring what it looks like for two companies to join together and create something new together, or a factory for creating new things together. So those are kind of the two primary business offerings that Fizzy Ventures has, both very much in a consultative sort of way, either for dollars in the second one or often for equity in the first one.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, but there needs to be kind of a minimum total addressable
Yeah.
market or whatever. But so is there I mean, do you have a figure in mind that says, hey, this is the TAM that we kind of look for?
Yeah, so if you're planning on being venture capital backed company, your company should be able to hit $100 million in annual recurring revenue. If you're not doing that as a venture backed company, I question whether you should be venture backed.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
If you're not intending on being venture backed and you're bootstrapping this thing from the way up, I love what you're doing, and in my mind, I kind of do that out of just the love of the game. I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to spend a whole lot of time with you.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that half-hour call or hour call or something along those lines, and maybe
Right.
make some connections for you. Um, uh, but yeah, in that vein. And as far as like the innovation efforts inside of companies, generally they're medium to large companies.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say generally 5 to 10,000 employees
Mm-hmm.
plus, before you start having to think about having an innovation function
Yeah.
inside your company. But yeah, I've consulted with university systems, with governments, with other large entities as well in terms of their innovation functions.
It is interesting that you do have a day job, but man, you have so many little antennas or starfish arms that head in different directions, and it's probably never boring. I would say
That's very
your
true.
calendar would look like the Rainbow Coalition that
It is,
Jesse
yeah.
Jackson would talk about, all the colors on there. But I have a theory that
Uh-huh.
I call like the entrepreneurial gene.
Yeah.
So I think that, it's like goes back, is it nature or nurture? I
Hmm.
believe that, and I'm not talking about just people that run businesses. I'm talking about true entrepreneurs. I believe that there is a genetic disposition to be an entrepreneur, that you were kind of born with this. It's the old adage that says, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
What is your thought? And feel free to push back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good question, Kevin. Um, the reason why I'm the reason why I'd probably more or less agree with you is that there doesn't seem to be a consistent way of identifying entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
right? So if
Well, there
you're
may
if
be one thread. They're always looking for opportunity.
yeah,
That
yeah,
might be
yeah.
the one common thread.
It's true, but in terms of like looking at demographics, right? Like
Hmm.
you can't say, oh, this person grew up in this area or has, there's no, if you're an in HR at
Hmm.
Microsoft, for example, and you said, oh, I want to find all of the entrepreneurial people inside of Microsoft. You can't do it.
That's right.
Like, there's just no way of doing it because you have to kind of know the person. You have to see them working. You have to see the reasons why they're going after something.
Mm.
You have to see the way in which they're going about it in some ways. And often like most entrepreneurs that I know are kind of deep down in some ways a little restless because
Hmm.
they need to be building. Entrepreneurs or builders in some ways, as the
Hmm.
term goes, a lot of
Creators,
over,
yeah.
yeah, they can't not, like,
Hmm.
they wake up and that's just what they have to do, and it can, um and that's hard to put in an org chart, and it's hard to put in a personality test. I think you're able to see entrepreneurs by what they've done,
Hmm.
not what they talk about, not what they can sing the song of their people of. It's oh yeah, you're an entrepreneur, you're a builder, like, tell me. None of them have to have worked out, right? Like
Right.
you could have just a line of failed companies behind you, but man, you started every one and you were trying to figure something out there,
That's
even
right.
if you might not have been super great at it. Like, in some ways, that resilience, that
Hmm.
grit to keep on
Yep.
trying and get up again, that is, it's hard to come by. I can see why you call it a gene, and it seems very difficult to teach.
Mhm. I think there's a telltale sign. Is if you'll lift their laptop, there's post-it notes hidden under there of things they're going to do when they get off, when they get off the ideas that they had, or look in their laptop
You mean
bag.
these ones?
No, those they've got them stuffed down in there that hey, I can't do it right now, but at 5:01, I am going to I'm going to make that call for sure. Yeah, I think there are certain, yeah, you're right. There's not outside or visible signs, but man, if you dig a little bit below the surface, I think they appear. But
Yeah.
you have had, so many different opportunities to grow and lead and lessons learned, and not just, by yourself, but what you've seen in other founders, as well as they're trying to lead companies. What are just one or two just kind of salient nuggets that you could just say, hey, I don't care what you're doing. These are rock solid. If you're going to build your team, if you're going to start this thing and it's going to be successful, here's one or two things you got to do that are just keystone,
Yeah.
really just things that are just foundational.
Yeah, certainly. First off, I would say that everybody knows that you need curiosity in order to do this. That's where you're able to find the solutions. That's where you're curious about the problems that people have, and in a rich, deep way, not just in a surface level way, but really getting to the root of the issue, so that your solution that you've come up with really answers that. But what I think a lot of
Mm.
people forget and don't notice is that you can't be curious without being humble.
Mm. Wow. Yeah.
Right? Because if you're not humble, then you won't pay enough attention to the things that you should be paying attention to in order to understand that problem, in order to observe the person going through their workday or their routines who's experiencing that problem and knowing everything about it. So yeah, I see curiosity and humility as going hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Um, so
I
I
love
think
it.
that one's really rich, and I see it in all of my favorite founders.
Hmm.
Not necessarily in all of the CEOs that produce great returns for their companies,
Hmm.
but in every entrepreneur.
Mm.
Therein lies a bit of a difference, I think. Um, the uh, the second thing is that you're not an island.
Hmm.
Even the best entrepreneurs I know can't do it by themselves. In fact, the best entrepreneurs I know generally have a tiny team, and particularly serial ones, have a tiny team that they always go into battle with together almost.
Hmm.
Like, hey, I have a new idea. I need to call up Joe and Sally because Sally's my operations person, and I don't know how to do that without her. And Joe is my creative person or something along those lines. It's very rarely do I back solo founders
Hmm.
because of that.
Yeah.
It's hard to recognize where you have your own
Mm.
strengths and your own weaknesses without that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Those are
those are
great.
those are kind of my two go-tos as an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Um, and key factors in how I evaluate teams of startups that I work with.
I mean, those are great characteristics to evaluate someone by, but they're also great characteristics to live by, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. But I especially love that I have, I've done this, almost 300 episodes. So
Yeah.
it is amazing that, I've asked this question quite often, to our guests, but I think you're the first person that's ever said, be humble.
Hmm.
I said,
Hmm.
and there's so much in that word. It's like you're always learning, you're willing to pivot. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to have the credit for it, you do take on the blame. You don't take credit, you take blame, and you
Yeah.
defer credit, to your team. But yeah, those I love those. I love all three of the things that you mentioned in the the being curious, being humble, and the fact that no man is an island.
Yeah.
What a great reminder. But we've chased so many different things, and I mean, what a great conversation. But
Well,
there's
same,
something
Kevin.
I haven't asked you about. You just like to wrap us up with today, and then maybe just tell people where the best place to find you.
Yeah, for sure. I think everybody's scared of AI, and we don't know how to approach it. Um, the one thing I've been leaving a lot of conversations with, because I work in AI every day in my day job and in my side job, is that don't turn artificial intelligence into human intelligence when you are thinking about it and when you're interacting with it. We as humans tend to put ourselves or think things that we build are better representations of ourselves than they actually are. And that can lead us to not be humble about understanding how to interact with this artificial intelligence and how it can actually augment a lot of what we're doing and help us come to new heights of creative humanity. So it's a bit of an aside, but that's what I'd like to say a little bit that on AI on that score. And best place to reach me is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Not only because Microsoft owns it, but because it's a great place to have a lot of solid business
Yeah, it
conversations
is.
around topical areas. So yeah,
It is. Well, Taylor, it's been a true pleasure to have you on today, and like I could continue chatting with you all afternoon, but you have other Fizzy ventures to
it's
tend
true.
to for sure. But and just thank you again for taking time just to chat with us today and just share your wisdom and your experience with us, and really just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Taylor, have a great evening.
Will do. Thank you, Kevin.
I hope you heard some great takeaways from our guests today. Make sure you reach out to them, and thank you again for playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.